Have you seen someone who runs away from people because they are rich? Is it possible for someone to choose to stay away from his or her rich family members? If you are thinking what I am thinking, then listen, let's find out why Mama decided to stay away from her children. Every day, people whispered about Mama. She was old and dressed in torn clothes, sitting on the street corner, shaking a little tin can for money. Her hands were rough, her feet covered in dust. People said her children were very rich, living in a big mansion across the town. Yet, here was Mama, begging for food and shelter. She must have been used for rituals, people murmured. Why else would a rich man's mother be on the street like this? But there was more to Mama's story than anyone could guess. She had two children, Adodo and Efosa, who would come often, dressed in fine clothes, calling out, "Mama, Mama." But the moment she saw them, Mama would grab her things and run. She would hide until they went away, leaving them in tears with broken hearts. Adodo and Efosa tried to bring her money and gifts, but Mama never took them. She would only shake her head and move farther away, her eyes avoiding theirs. Her children couldn't understand why she acted like that. They would kneel down in front of her, tears in their eyes, begging her to come home. But Mama would only turn her back on them and walk away. Once, Adodo left a bag of money with some of the other beggars, hoping Mama would accept it later. But when they gave it to her, she threw it aside and refused to touch it. "Why do you keep running from them, Mama?" one of the beggars asked her one evening. "They are good children. You should see how they cry when you turn away," another one added. Mama looked away, her eyes filled with sadness. "They don't understand," she whispered, her voice shaking. The other beggars exchanged glances, puzzled and curious. They pressed her to tell them why, but she refused to talk to them. Mama didn't want to break her promise, but her heart was heavy. Her children kept coming to look for her, leaving gifts and food she couldn't take. She needed help. She went to see Mama Obinna, the woman who had connected her to the priestess who performed the ritual for her. Mama explained everything and begged Mama Obinna to ask the priestess if she could at least accept small gifts from her children. Mama Obinna shook her head. "Mama, you know the priestess doesn't change her mind. You vowed to give up the life of comfort so your children could have wealth. If you break that vow even a little, you risk their fortunes, maybe even their lives." Mama's heart ached. She felt trapped. She wanted to protect her children, but she also wanted them to stop coming for her, to stop waiting and crying at her spot on the street. She thanked Mama Obinna and left, deciding what she had to do. The next day, she gathered her courage and went to her son's mansion. It was the first time she had been there. The gateman almost didn't recognize her. "I'm here to see my son Adodo," she said, her voice trembling. The gateman, surprised, hurried to tell Adodo and his wife that Mama was at the gate. In moments, Adodo and his wife, Isiwa, rushed out, their faces showing shock and happiness. They could barely believe it. After all this time, Mama was here, standing right at their doorstep. Mama took a deep breath, her face sad but determined. "I'm sorry for embarrassing you by begging on the streets. I don't want you to think I don't love you. But I need you to let me be," she said, her voice soft. "I can't come here. I can't take anything from you. Please understand." Before she could finish, Adodo wrapped his arms around her in a tight hug. Mama was caught off guard, and while she struggled, Isiuwa quickly locked the gate behind them. They guided Mama inside, her protest growing louder, but her strength too weak to fight them off. Adodo led her into a beautiful room they had prepared just for her, filled with soft blankets and a bed with freshly folded sheets. Isiuwa brought in a tray of steaming jollof rice and a tall glass of cold water, setting it by Mama's bedside. "Mama," Isiuwa said gently, "please don't leave us. Your daughter is on her way here right now. We can be together." Mama's hand trembled. She looked at her son and his wife and the food laid out for her. Adodo and Isiuwa tried to make Mama eat. They spoke to her softly, begged her, even tried joking with her. But Mama refused, pushing the plate away every time it was brought near her. "I won't eat your food," she said, her eyes darting around like she was looking for an escape. "I'd rather die than eat this food. If you force me, I'll end my life right here. And people will call you ritualist for real." Hearing this, Adodo and Isiuwa stopped pressing her, though they both looked worried. Soon, Mama's daughter, Efosa, arrived, her arms filled with bright, beautiful clothes and other gifts she had brought for their mother. She stepped into the room, her face glowing with excitement. "Mama, look what I brought for you. You'll finally be able to change into something nice," Efosa said, holding up a dress for her mother to see. But Mama only frowned, her face growing colder as she shook her head. "No, I don't want these things," she said, pushing the clothes away. "Take them back. I don't want anything from any of you. Just let me go." Efosa's face fell, and she looked at her brother, confused and hurt. "Mama, please, we're only trying to help you," she whispered, but Mama didn't soften. "Then listen to me. Let me go," Mama insisted, her voice growing firmer. But her children stayed close, watching her every move. Seeing that they wouldn't release her, Mama took a deep breath and said, "Fine, if you won't let me go, then at least listen to me. I'll tell you what I will eat. Follow me." Curious, Adodo and Efosa followed their mother outside to the gate. She reached into her pocket and took out some crumpled money, handing them to the gateman. "Go to the nearby shop," she told him, "and buy food for me. I will only eat what you bring." The gateman nodded and left, but the moment his back was turned, Mama tried to run, looking for any way to slip through the gate. Adodo noticed and quickly stepped in front of her, gently but firmly blocking her path. Her children were watching her closely now, making it nearly impossible to get away. While they waited for the gateman to return, Efosa pulled her brother aside. She looked around nervously before whispering, Adodo, don't you think this is strange? What if Mama has become something else? What if she's a witch? Adodo looked at her, his face serious and a little hurt. Efosa, that's our mother you're talking about. She had made sacrifices for us when we had nothing. Don't ever speak like that again, he warned. Efosa looked away, feeling a mix of shame and confusion. Something about Mama's behavior troubled her deeply. Yet, Adodo refused to believe there was anything dark behind it. He looked over at their mother, who was sitting quietly now, her eyes distant, as if she were holding onto a secret none of them could see. That night, Mama lay down on the soft, luxurious bed in the room her children had prepared for her. Her body, worn out from resisting them, finally gave in, and she drifted into a deep sleep, but her rest was troubled. In her dream, the priestess appeared, her face shadowed and stern, pointing a finger directly at Mama. You have broken your vow by staying here, by resting in luxury, even for a night, the priestess said, her voice echoing like thunder. You risk everything you gave up for your children's wealth. Leave this place immediately, or they will be doomed to poverty and suffering once more. Mama trembled in her sleep as the priestess continued. They will lose all they have, and worse, they will be cursed with pain and sickness. Leave now, while there is still hope to reverse what you have done. Mama jolted awake, her heart racing. The room felt too big, too grand, and it reminded her of the warning she had just heard. She scrambled out of bed, grabbing her tattered shawl, and rushed to the door. She pounded on it, calling for her children to let her out. Adodo, Isiwa, and even Efosa, who had stayed the night, all rushed to her side, worried and confused. Mama, what is wrong? It is still very early in the morning. Please lie down, Adodo pleaded. But Mama wouldn't listen. No, you must let me go. I've stayed here too long. I am risking everything. Please let me leave, she cried, her voice rising in panic. As they argued, Adodo's phone rang. He stepped aside to answer, and after a few moments, his face turned pale. He turned to Isuwa, his voice shaking. That was my business partner. Our contract, the one worth millions. They just pulled out. They terminated everything, just like that, he said, his hands trembling. Before anyone could process this, Efosa's call came in. She informed Adodo her medical results she got after experiencing pain on her breast. Adodo's face turned ashen. What? No, that can't be. Breast cancer. He dropped the phone, his eyes wide with shock. The words struck Mama like a blow. She fell to her knees, knowing in her heart that the priestess' warning was already coming true. She grabbed Adodo's hand, her eyes filled with fear and pleading. Please, my son, let me go. You must let me go. Later in that day, Isiuwa suddenly felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. Her face twisted in worry, and Adodo's heart sank as he watched her. She was pregnant, and he feared the worst. "Let me go," Mama shouted. "Mama, you can't leave," Adodo said. But his voice was weak, his mind racing with everything that had just happened. When Adodo left the house, Mama looked at Isuwa. "If you truly love me, if you want peace for yourselves, you must let me go. I will end my life if you keep me here." Isuwa, struggling with her own pain, finally nodded and opened the door. She signaled the gateman to let Mama go. The moment she was released, Mama ran out of the mansion as fast as her tired legs could carry her. She didn't stop until she reached the main road, where she fell to her knees, grabbing a handful of sand and rubbing them on her clothes and skin. "Let my children be rich. Let them keep their fortune," she cried, her voice echoing through the streets. She smeared herself with dirt, refusing the life of comfort for herself. "I chose the life of dust and begging, so my children may live in peace and wealth," she said, repeating the words over and over, as if sealing a vow. Mama was consumed by her desperate pleas for her children's safety. As Mama returned to the dusty streets, resuming her life of begging, a strange shift took place, almost as if her sacrifice was renewing its power. At the hospital, Efosa, who had been trembling with fear, was now flooded with relief as the doctor returned with her test results. "Miss Efosa," he said with a calm smile, "you are perfectly healthy. There is no sign of cancer. You are free to go." Adodo, still shocked from the contract loss, received a sudden call. "Mr. Adodo, we've reconsidered the contract. Please come in to sign the final documents," the voice on the other end said, and his heart filled with both joy and confusion. Back at the clinic, Isiuwa, who had fared the worst for her pregnancy, was told she was still carrying her baby safely. Although she had lost some blood, the doctor reassured her that everything would be fine. When Adodo returned home and learned that his mother had left, he felt a wave of anger and betrayal. "Why would you let her go, Isuwa? I never wanted her to leave. We could have tried harder to help her," he said, his voice rising. Isuwa gently placed a hand on his arm. "Adodo, think about it. She was suffering, and the more we held on to her, the more misfortune came to us. Maybe there's something she's not telling us. She begged us to let her go, and when we did, everything returned to normal," she explained softly. Adodo sighed, his anger softening as he thought about her words. "But she's our mother. I can't let her live like that." Unable to bear it any longer, Adodo went out, determined to find his mother. He walked down the familiar streets where she often begged, and there she was, Mama, sitting in her usual spot, her clothes and face covered in dust. He called out to her, his voice cracking with emotion. "Mama!" Mama looked up and saw the pain in her son's face, his tears flowing freely. The sight of her beloved son's tears broke her heart into 1,000 pieces, and she could no longer hold back her own. She hurried up the street, away from his gaze, until she reached the house of Mama Obinna, the friend who had first led her to the priestess years ago. Mama Obinna welcomed her, sensing her distress. Mama poured out everything that had happened: the contract loss, the sickness, and her children's confusion. Mama Obinna nodded knowingly. All this has happened because you never told them the truth, Mama. You kept them in the dark about the ritual. Keeping secrets can bring its own cost. Mama listened, feeling the weight of her friend's words settle over her. Mama Obinna continued, "My own son knows about my sacrifice. That's why he keeps his distance and doesn't expect anything from me. Your children's pain comes from not understanding. You need to tell them the truth." Mama took a deep breath, realizing that her friend was right. Mama gathered her children once again, this time with a heavy heart, knowing she had to finally tell them everything. As her son Adodo, his wife Isiuwa, her daughter Efosa, and Efosa's husband sat before her, Mama's eyes filled with sorrow. She reminded them of their hard times, of the years of struggle they all endured, and how 2 years ago she had reached a breaking point. "I could no longer stand to see you all suffer," she began, her voice trembling. "I wanted to give you a better life, no matter what it cost me." She paused, gathering her courage. "I went to the priestess and made a vow. I chose a life of debt and begging so that you could live in riches and luxury. But as part of that vow, I cannot eat from your wealth, and I can never share in your comfort." Her children sat in stunned silence, the truth settling over them like a weight. Mama's words hung in the air, heavy with sacrifice and pain. Before they could react, Mama stood up, running out of the compound, feeling ashamed for keeping this from them. Shaken by the confession, Isiuwa returned to the house in silence. That night, she made a decision. Packing her belongings, she prepared to leave all the luxuries behind. She went to Adodo and told him, "I can't stay here, Adodo. I can't live with the wealth that came from Mama's suffering. I love you, but until you decide to leave this too, I won't be with you." Her words left Adodo torn. Desperate, he went to Mama's spot, where he found her looking worn and defeated. He knelt down before her, his voice breaking. "Mama, please, you don't have to suffer like this anymore. Uncurse yourself for all of us." But Mama only shook her head. "If I break this curse, my son, you will lose everything. You will return to the poverty you knew before." Later that day, Efosa heard of her brother's visit to Mama. Furious, she rushed to her mother, demanding, "Don't you dare leave the curse. I've tasted a better life, and I don't want to go back to the way things were." Mama looked at her daughter, her heart heavy, but said nothing. She knew that Efosa's words were born from fear of poverty, yet it still hurt her deeply. Adodo and Efosa soon quarreled over the situation, each feeling torn between what they wanted and what was right. Days passed, and finally, after much thought and long arguments, they reached an agreement. They would rather lose everything and start fresh than live with the guilt of Mama's sacrifice. They went to Mama, their hearts resolved. "Uncurse yourself, Mama. We'll start again, all of us." Adodo said, his voice steady. Mama took her children to the priestess, who listened to their decision without surprise. She nodded and agreed to leave the course, but she set one condition. You must sell everything you have gained from this vow. All the wealth must be returned to the coven. Only then will the curse be lifted. Adodo and Efosa agreed, and over the next few days, they sold every possession, every property, until they were left with nothing. They returned all the money as instructed, and finally the curse was broken. With no riches left, they returned to the slum to live with Mama, learning to find peace and joy in a simpler life. As they settled in, they began to understand that while they had lost their wealth, they had gained something far more precious: a life free from the weight of secret and sacrifice. Mama's son and his wife had fallen on hard times and started working as attendants at a local beer parlor to make ends meet. Meanwhile, Mama's son-in-law traveled to Abuja to seek help from his uncle, hoping this connection could help him bounce back and improve his situation. One day, feeling the weight of their struggles, Mama's daughter, Efosa, decided to reach out for help. She called her brother's best friend and shared all the challenges they were going through. Touched by her story, the friend went to the beer parlor to see Adodo. When Adodo saw his friend, he felt embarrassed about his situation, but his friend was filled with compassion. Instead of judging Adodo, his friend invited him to his office. There, he offered to transfer a valuable contract to him. This contract, involving a continuous supply of raw materials to a large company, was worth millions and could change his life. Adodo's friend even promised to help him gather the funds needed to start the contract. 2 months later, the hard work paid off. Adodo earned a substantial income from the contract, which continued to grow. With his newfound wealth, he bought a beautiful mansion and began living in luxury life once more. Around this time, Mama's son-in-law returned from Abuja. His uncle's support had paid off, and he had successfully started a transport company that had grown rapidly, expanding to 12 states across the country. He came back to take his wife with him to Abuja, where their new chapter awaited. Mama was sent for. As Mama entered the grand mansion, the sight before her felt like a dream. She had arrived in a car more luxurious than she had ever imagined, and the moment she stepped out, a red carpet stretched before her as if welcoming a queen. Dressed in a beautifully rich-colored attire chosen by her children, she walked into the mansion, her eyes taking in the beautiful home that was now theirs. Inside the mansion, Mama was led into a grand dining table, laid with all her favorite dishes. In the center, a large golden brown chicken sat, its delicious aroma filling the air. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her plate. She hadn't eaten a meal like this in years, not since she made her vow. Taking a deep breath, she took the first bite of the chicken. Instantly, her heart flooded with emotion. She remembered all those years of suffering, of sacrificing everything, and living on the streets, all for the sake of her children. Now she could sit here, enjoying the wealth her children had achieved with hard work and honor. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked around the table. She saw her children watching her, their eyes also filled with tears. These were not tears of sadness, but tears of joy, of reunion, and of gratitude. After all they had been through, they could finally live together in peace, knowing they had built their lives anew, free from any cause, with honesty and dignity. Mama's heart swelled with pride and love. She had always wanted the best for her children, and now she knew she had it. She raised her glass, filled with juice, and looked around at her children and their spouses. "I am proud of all of you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I am so glad I can finally enjoy your success without fear. May our family always stay together in love and honesty." Her children raised their glasses, and they all shared a meal, feeling like they had finally come home. The moral lesson of this story is true success and happiness comes from honesty, hard work, and family unity. Shortcuts and secrets may bring temporary gains, but they also carry a heavy price. When we choose the path of integrity, we may face challenges, but the rewards are lasting and pure. Mama's journey teaches us that love, sacrifice, and a life lived honorably bring real joy and fulfillment. This is Umma's story time. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. I am Amarachi Ihoma, the young storyteller.